Hi, I'm Robert Osborne. Throughout the month of October, TCM is turning some of the programming duties over to several of the most influential film critics we have in our midst today. The man on my left certainly falls into that category. He is Mick LaSalle, film critic for the San Francisco Chronicle, not to mention the author of two great books about the pre-code era of Hollywood, Complicated Women and the follow-up, Dangerous Men. Welcome, Mick.
Oh, thank you. It's good to be here.
Good to have you here. Now, our festival is called, most appropriately, I think, Critics' Choice. And the first choice for Mick is a silent film from 1925 from MGM starring Norma Shearer. And it's called Lady of the Night. So glad you picked this movie because it's a movie not a lot of people know.
No.
But why did you pick it?
Well, this is it's a perfect movie to pick because it's a great movie.
Yeah.
And anybody who sits here wants to, hit one out of the park.
Yes.
And also it's something that most people have never seen. I think it's shown on television once, and then before that was incredibly obscure. Nobody, in fact, for 70 years nobody saw it at all. And it's by a great director that few people have even heard of, Monta Bell. And it features Norma Shearer, who is somewhat known today, but she's not known for her silent films. And in a way, I think she was better in her silent films than she was in most of her talkies.
Why do you think that? I mean, what's the difference?
I think she's just more naturally a silent film actress. I mean, you could see, like if you watch Private Lives, there's this moment where there's this 2-minute silent sequence where it's like the best thing in the movie or the best thing she does. And I think it just took her a while to get used to talkies, whereas silent film was her, her natural habitat. And
even in the women, though, there are a lot of silent screen gestures that she does.
There's a little bit going on still in the women.
Why is this a great film?
Well, it's a great film for a number of reasons. I mean, first, it's beautifully directed. I mean, it's full of all the wonderful things that Monta Bell does in all of his movies, which he has these little moments that he creates, these little moments of longing, moments of introspection, and beautifully handled and not done in a fancy way, to call attention to itself. It's also, I think, metaphysically interesting because you have the situation in the movie. The central conceit of the movie is that you have two girls who are different, but they look very much alike. They're played by the same actress. But nobody in the movie knows that they look alike. Nobody ever in the movie recognizes that they look the same. So it's not the Patty Duke show. It's not a farce. It's instead, it's something that's making a statement. And the statement is, one girl is rich and the other one's poor. And that's what people see in the world. If this were a movie in a realistic convention, it would have been played by two different actresses. But instead, we're seeing them as they really are. And the message of the movie, one of the messages of the movie, is that we know that they're the same. But because they're in the world, nobody else ever will. And so it's kind of beautiful in that way.
Well, let's see the film. You've whetted our appetite. Here, released by MGM in 1925, chosen by Mick LaSalle, film critic for the San Francisco Chronicle, and an expert on pre-code films. Here's Lady of the Night. That is a wonderful movie.
That's great.
And that was Norma Shearer, 4 years before she spoke on film for the first time. And I'm back with the man who selected it for us to see, Mick LaSalle, film critic for the San Francisco Chronicle, noted author and a foremost scholar, I must say, on pre-code films.
Thank you.
Now, do you have a favorite scene in that movie?
A favorite scene is that whole sequence in the middle where everybody is wanting to be with somebody or wanting to be more than they are. And so she's on a date. The rich girl's on a date with the guy, and the poor girl wishes she was on the date, and the boyfriend of the poor girl is following her, and even the spinster aunt is putting on makeup. And it's sort of like everybody in the movie wants to be not only more than they are, but they want to be what they really could become, but maybe never will, which is even more serious. And it's kind of has this elliptical structure, and it's really lovely.
When did you first discover films?
When I was 20 years old, I saw Greta Garbo in A Woman of Affairs. And I didn't know what it was. It was on TV. And I didn't know who it was or what it was. And I was completely, just hypnotized by it. I was just, who is this woman? And then I found out it was Greta Garbo. And I thought, oh, I've heard of her. And then started getting into Garbo. And then that became an obsession. And then obsessions lead to other obsessions, and everything just gets bigger and bigger and better and better.
And is that also when you got so into pre-code films, that era?
I got interested in pre-code movies because I started noticing that the movies that I liked were the pre-codes. And I started getting frustrated with the movies that were made after censorship.
And why?
Because I could always tell how they were going to end.
Okay.
Even if it's like it's a movie where, you know, Clark Gable is a lovable crook. You know that at the end of the movie he's going to jail. You even know that like Rosalind Russell's going to turn him in.
Right.
Even though she's in love with him because of the code. And so I started, because I started seeing so many old movies, I started becoming frustrated with the code, and then started really loving the movies that were made before the code. But I never really got a chance to see them, except in, you know, dribs and drabs, until TCM. And then when TCM came along, then it was just, you know, it just went crazy. I just taped every single, you know, thing and watched them all. And, you know, because it was hundreds and hundreds suddenly available.
We're so glad you're here talking about these.
I love being here.
And we have more coming up.
Great.
Don't go away. Film critic Mick LaSalle's going to be back with me to talk about another movie he picked for us to see. This one's a musical from 1933 with a glowing cast that includes Joan Blondell and Ruby Keeler, Dick Powell, and Ginger Rogers. Hi, I'm Robert Osborne. Some of the most respected film critics we have in this country are picking their favorite movies for us to see here on TCM this month. I'm very pleased to again be joined by Mick LaSalle, film critic for the San Francisco Chronicle, the author of many books about movies, including a new one being released in 2011 called The Beauty of the Real, which is a look at contemporary French actresses. Welcome back, Mick.
I'm glad to be here.
Good to have you here.
Yes.
Now, one of Mick's fields of expertise is pre-code Hollywood movies, and it's a pre-code movie that's his second selection in our Critics' Choice Festival this evening. It's Gold Diggers of 1933, a Warner Brothers musical directed by Mervyn LeRoy with one of the best assets a musical could have in the 1930s, and that's choreography by Busby Berkeley.
Yeah.
Now, you talk about pre-code films. One doesn't usually think of a musical like this as a pre-code film.
Yeah.
But it is, actually, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very pre-code.
And why did you pick it?
I picked it because it was pre-code in the two ways that the pre-codes are pre-code. And one of the ways is that they're sexy and risque and kind of socially daring. And this movie is, though not as daring as some of them. But also, the other way is that they're political. Movies stopped being political after 1934, but this movie really, you know, goes out there making a political statement about the Depression and about what the filmmakers think that the government should do to help people. And so it's really, you know, it's pretty strident.
And very, very unusual for a musical in those days.
Very unusual for a musical. And in fact, when the movie really starts getting overt about what it has to say, it almost feels like it's out of nowhere. It almost feels like when Chaplin starts making a speech at the end of The Great Dictator. It's like,
right.
What? You know, what is it? Where did this come from? But I like that because it's almost like saying, hey, you know, we got a crisis here. What's going on, this depression, it's so bad that we can, you know, strain the normal ways of making movies to just come out and say something.
Right.
You know.
And it's also interesting because this was a musical, and in those days, in the depth of the Depression, people were going to musicals to take their minds off of things. And so if a movie was preachy, people might stay away from it. But in a musical, you've already got them.
Yeah.
So you put these kind of little preachments in there.
This movie it's interesting because it's in a way it is, you know, it's diverting and it's escapist, but it's also very serious because as you'll see, I mean, the first number of the movie is "We're in the Money," which is used in, you know, any documentary about escapist Hollywood.
Right.
They talk about the Depression, we're in the money. But notice, I just tell people, notice how the number ends, because the number ends in a way that's a lot different than escapism.
Right.
And so that's, you know, and that's the beginning of the movie's statement.
Right. And it's got a great cast,
Oh.
one of the wonderful casts.
It not only has a wonderful cast, but it also has the right emphasis, because a
Right.
lot of times you'll have like Ruby Keeler having more lines and more to do than Joan
It
Blondell.
is kind of the stock company, same people
Yeah,
that are in
same
a lot of
people.
these musicals.
Yeah, but this time Joan Blondell gets
Right.
to really be the
And
star.
was there ever anybody better than Joan Blondell?
She was great.
But we also have Dick Powell, we have Ruby Keeler, we have Ginger Rogers at the very beginning
Yes.
of her career.
Absolutely, and the very beginning of the movie.
Indeed. Well, let's have a look. Here it is. A movie that Warner Brothers made in 1933 and boasted about was the biggest show on earth. Here it is, as selected by the much respected film critic for the San Francisco Chronicle, Mick LaSalle. Gold Diggers of 1933. Such an interesting finish for a film that's kind of basically supposed to be a very lighthearted, happy musical. I'm back with the man who selected it for us to see tonight, the man San Franciscans look to first for film, somebody who, now that we have the internet, is read all over the world, the film critic for the San Francisco Chronicle, Mick LaSalle. Wonderful choice, this movie.
That ending is like getting hit by a 2x4 at the end. It really is. And, you know, I love that they chose to end, you know, the musical within the musical ends. And then as soon as it ends, you see the Warner's logo come up and they play a few bars from it and they end the movie. And which is sort of like Warner Brothers saying, hey, the statement of the musical within the musical is our statement too. We're saying the same thing. Originally, the movie was supposed to end with doing Penton in the Park again. They were going to come back to that.
Right.
And Jack Warner said, no, forget it. You know, we got to go. This is how we end the movie. And it's just a great way to end it. You know, in the old days too, the credits there would be no closing credits. It would just say the end, boom, the lights come on. And you just think about what it must have been like to see this movie, boom, boom, end, and then lights come on, and then you have to walk out of the theater.
Right.
It's just, I think it's very powerful.
Right. Now tell us a little about your new book, about what fascinates you so much about French actresses.
Well, to me, what's going on in French cinema is kind of like what was going on with the women of pre-code. You have about 24 amazing actresses making like 3 or 4 movies a year. They're great. The movies are built around them. And so you have all these great women's films. And in the United States, we say, oh, you know, where are the women's films? You know, they're in France. They're not in the United States. For the year 2001, I decided to just look and just see what were the movies made in France, what were the movies made in the United States. I just, you know, chose that year at random. In the United States, we made 400 movies, and 19 had decent roles for women where they were the star. And some of those was silly romantic comedies. You know, one was Glitter with Mariah Carey, which nobody took seriously. Then I looked at France, 200 movies, 75 great roles for women, and not counting like bikini movies, but, you know, really good roles. So you're getting like 2 a week sometimes with fantastic actresses. And so to me, this is like a golden age. Nobody knows about it. Just like nobody knew really about the golden age of the pre-code women.
Right.
And so I'm just going where, you know, where the golden age is and following it.
Are those films being exported, or are they mainly staying in France?
Enough are available that you can see that would, you know, begin, you know, one's interest. And so there are more that regular people can see that they don't know about. And so that's what the book is for.
Mick, thanks so much for being here. It's been a real treat talking to you.
My pleasure.
You could do it for hours.
Yes.
Indeed. And you, please stay with us. We have another TCM treat coming right up. And as always, it's uncut and commercial free. That's the way we do it here at TCM.